Welcome back. Welcome back. Like, share, subscribe. We get into our book club reading. The Trilateral Commission. We on the Bilderberg, which is a secret society that was created. They meet every year and they make policy for not only America, where the heads of industry and political people get together every year to set policy. So we're dealing with the secret society of the Bilderberg Group. Even the Rothschilds, excuse me, even the Rothschilds attend these meetings. Rockefellers attend these meetings. Bilderberg has its inception in the brilliant brain of Dr. Joseph Ritzender, an extraordinary character who flitted through Europe talking on intimate terms with the prime ministers, labor leaders, industrial managers, and magnates, revolutionaries, and intellectuals. In short, all of the non-communist rulers and would-be rulers of the free nations of Europe. During World War II, Rittner was top aide to General Sorotsky, head of the Polish government in exile in London. After discussion with several men who were to become post-war leaders in the European movement, including the Bilderbergers, Van Zeelen, and Pipelinets mentioned below, Rittner suggested regular meetings of the foreign ministers of the continental countries. In these meetings from October 1942 to 1944, the post-war customs union Benelux, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg was born. Benelux represented an early move toward post-war European unity. After the war, Rittner explained his concern for European unification in a meeting at Chatham House. The end of the period during which the white man spread his activities over the whole globe saw the continent itself undergoing a process of internal disruption. He explained, at the end of the two world wars, there are no big powers left in continental Europe, whose inhabitants, after all, represent the most valuable human element in the world. Oh, so white people is the most valuable human people in the world, huh? Wow, that's deep. Europeans, Rittner suggested, have rejected both Hitler's New Order and communism, but the permanent solution, excuse me, but the permanent solution to European weakness was to move towards a federal union of neighboring European countries in which the states will relinquish part of their sovereignty. At this time, Rittner was Secretary General of Belgium Prime Minister Paul Van Zeelen, Independent League for Economic Cooperation, ILEC, also called Economic League for European Cooperation. ILEC later became one of the constituent organizations of the European movement. Rittner became its Secretary General. Soon after his Chatham House speech, Rittner talked to W. Arvindale Harriman, U.S. Ambassador to England, who arranged for him to go to the United States to secure U.S. support for ILEC. I found in America a unanimous approval for ideas among financiers, businesses, and politicians. Mr. Leffingwell's senior partner in J.P. Morgan Bank, Illuminati, John J. McCoy. John J. McCoy who initiated the European Youth Campaign, was a top wartime planner of civil affairs in Europe. He revamped the World Bank to suit Wall Street wishes as its president 1947 to 49. So he worked with the Rothschilds. That's their bank. Wow. He then became U.S. High Commissioner for West Germany. Apparently, he was also Eisenhower's first presence for Secretary of State, but Senator Robert Taft vetoed this, claiming that every Republican candidate for president since 1936 had been nominated by Chase Bank. That's the Rockefellers, Illuminati. McCoy was chairman of the board of the Ford Foundation. Wow. And with Shepard Stone made it into a powerful force in international affairs. McCoy became chairman of the Chase Manhattan Bank and of the Council of Foreign Relations until David Rockefeller took over in 1970. He was also a member of the Warren Commission who investigated JFK. Wow. Okay. Nelson and David Rockefeller, Alfred Sloan, chairman of the Dodge Motor Company, Charles Hook, president of the American Rolling Mills Company, Sir William Wiseman, partner to Con Loeb, George Franklin Rockefeller in law, executive director of Council of Foreign Relations, and the Trilateral Commission coordinator, and especially my old friend Adolph Burl were all in favor, and the Burl agreed to lead the American section. John Foster Dulles, Secretary of State under Eisenhower, also agreed to help us. Dulles and Berg have both assisted the wartime exile governments. Later on, says Rittner, whenever we needed any assistance for the European movement, Dulles was among those in America who helped us most. Returning to Europe, Rittner took up his job as Secretary General of the European movement while the Marshall Plan was getting underway. The European movement consisted of a series of existing pro-European organizations with a central apparatus and national council superimposed upon it. Thanks to the importance of the European unity in U.S. policy, the EM received considerable support from the U.S. government's secret funds. You heard that, secret funds and private sources via the American Committee for United Europe and other institutions. Secret funds like using U.S. aid. As Rittner explains in The Cold War produced in the Western world, the necessity of an ever closer collaboration to protect their moral and ethical values, their democratic institutions, and even their independence against the growing communist threat. The U.S. Rittner went on, had taken the lead with the Marshall Plan, and NATO had followed on the heels of the Truman Doctrine in 1949. The Korean crisis, the Korean War started in 1950 and was used to scare Europeans into accepting a rearmament program, which included German rearmament, demonstrated how far-seeing the statesmen both in the United States and in Europe had been when they decided to close collaboration between both sides of the North Atlantic. I got to get some damn batteries. I'm going to get me a ladder and get up there and change that shit. But the road to European unity was difficult. By 1952, the EM was experiencing difficulties as opposing tendencies grew in the U.S. and in continental Europe. Rittner registers the traditional elitist complaint. Political decisions of such magnitude are rarely understood by the public at large. The new policy was attacked from the outset by elements in the various countries which saw advantages in sowing discord in Western ranks. Objections based on nationalist and isolationist sentiments were voiced, and a certain distrust of the U.S. grew in Western Europe, paralleled by a similar feeling in the U.S. towards the European countries. Rittner observed, the rising tide of anti-Americanism in particularly every country of Western Europe was not confined to communist influence or left-wing circles, but was equally prevalent among conservatives and liberals. The United States was disliked, feared, and sneered at with unanimity that was remarkable. This in the 40s, so you can imagine the hatred towards the United States right now. This feeling threatened the solidarity of the Western world's defenses against communism. Ridner was one of those who realized that unless this tendency of anti-Americanism were checked it could lead to a disastrous weakening of Western position. He decided to do something about it. He resigned as Secretary General of the European Movement, retaining, however, an honorary role. Ridner always believed that public opinion follows the lead of influential individuals. He much preferred working through a few careful selected people to publicity on a massive scale. Ridner had plenty of influential friends. He consulted ex-Belgian Prime Minister Paul van Zeelen, who had moved on from Benelux and ILEC to become president of the OEEC, as well as Paul Rykens, chairman of Unilever, the huge food and soap transnational and wartime advisor to exiled Dutch government in London. Rykens suggested that Prince Bernhard would be interested also. This proved to be the case. Ridner's plan for Atlantic European reconciliation was to get the leaders of opinion in the most important European countries to make an appraisal of where the Americans were wrong. Then at a completely private meeting of top-level people from both continents to present this frank critique to the leaders of American opinion and give them an opportunity to answer the indictment. To get the most important figures in to push towards European, U.S., and Canadian unity together with similar important Americans was a sensible way to set about reaching Atlantic European concessions, or at least nearing the points at issue at a time of growing grief over German rearmament, U.S. policy in Southeast Asia, the Cold War McCarthyism, and the process of European integration. To lay the groundwork for each such a gathering, a European critique was prepared for U.S. policy and behavior. Prince Bernhard sent it to some American friends, and most importantly, William Harriman. Ridner, Prince Bernhard, and the Rykens drew up a list of top people in NATO European countries, seeking 2 people from each country who would give the conservative and liberal slant. The resulting group consisted of Paul van Zeelen and Alec de Gasperi, the architect of post-war Italian Christian democracy. Both prime ministers of their countries and presidents of honor in the European movement. Antoine Péniry, right-wing French prime minister. 3 leaders of the anti-communist social democracy British Labour Party leader. Now here we go with the unions. Hugh Gaskell, Max Brod, the mayor of Hamburg, and Guy Mollet, leader of the French Socialists. Colin Goubens, who, as the head of Britain's wartime special operations executive, the model of the U.S. Office of Strategic Services, which in turn provided people and practices for the CIA. Wow, you can't make this up. Which was set up in 1947, worked closely with Ridner and many others in government in exile in London in his role of assisting anti-Nazi resistant movement. Diplomats of Italy and Greece top German corporate lawyer Rudolf Miller, who had been chief German economic administrator in the British American Bazaar of a company post-war Germany, Otto Wolf von Armagon, the Cologne head of the family firm, whose father had been an early substantial contributor to Hitler, and conservative Danish politician and publisher of Denmark's top daily newspaper. Harriman's father had left him the Union Pacific Railroad, and he went into banking, first establishing W.A. Harriman Bank in the 20s, and then Brown Banking Brothers. Harriman, a friend of Franklin D. Roosevelt, was his top aide. Wow. Harry Hopkins Harriman worked in the New Deal National Recovery Administration and then headed the Business Advisory Council in the U.S. Department of Commerce. Even before the United States declared war on Japan, Harriman was a key figure in building up the war industry. President Roosevelt made him his representative and defense experimenter in London, where the Lease Act passed in March 1941. Connections made or continued from as far back as World War I in the lease supply programs between U.S. officials and businessmen and their European counterparts continue into the post-war European history and do much to illuminate Bilderberg. Harriman was among the most important Americans in Europe throughout the war, arranging the lease supply of the Soviet Union as well as Britain. Jean Monnet, the father of Europe, headed the combined British-French Supply Committee until the French collapse in 1940. Then he went as Churchill's appointee to the British Supply Council in Washington and drafted the Victory Program of War Production for Roosevelt in 1943. Wow, you can't make this up. 3 wise men worked out the procedures by which NATO's 15 nations jointly negotiate their defense budgets to this day. Wow. Early in 1948, Harriman, after serving briefly as Truman's Commerce Secretary, became the top Marshall Plan administrator in Europe, heading the Economic Cooperation Administration, which shaped the domestic and European policies of all the recipient nations. Jean Monnet was at the time heading the French Plan for Industrial Modernization. After completing the NATO job, Monnet directed the first stage of French-German-Italian economic integration as head of the European Coal and Steel Community. When consulting about the European critique of Americans, Harriman made clear that he thought further activity should wait until 1952 presidential elections. Harriman knew Eisenhower wanted to use critique against Truman and the Democrats. Soon after Eisenhower's victory, Prince Bernhard set off to the United States to organize the American end of Bilderberg. Wow. When he finally got around to seeing his old friend Walter Beadle Smith, Eisenhower's wartime chief of staff Smith, who was then director of the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, asked, "Why the hell didn't you come to me in the first place?" Nonetheless, there was some delay due to Beadle Smith's role in organizing the new Eisenhower administration. Smith turned the matter over to C.D. Jackson. Jackson went to John Coleman, president of the Burroughs Corporation. Oh, the Burroughs who started IBM. Okay. Coleman was a member of the important Committee for National Trade Policy and an advocate of total abolition of U.S. tariffs as a means of increasing the economic integration of the West. Wow, so he was against tariffs. The Committee for National Trade Policy undertook to draft an American reply to the European critique. Several of its members presented this reply to the first meeting of the Bilderberg Hotel, and Coleman briefly became the U.S. chairman of Bilderberg. We're going to stop there, and then we're going to go on when we come back. Oh, wow. This chapter is so long. Oh, this is so good to me. I know y'all probably don't like it the way I do, but like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, hit the like button.